The morning fog clings to the shattered remains of what was once a French village. It is June 1944. Somewhere in the ruins, death waits with infinite patience. Private First Class Raymond Ray Castillo presses his back against a crumbling stone wall. His hands are shaking, not from fear, though fear is there too, but from the bitter cold that has seeped into his bones after 3 nights without sleep. 40 yards to his left, Corporal Danny Morrison lies face down in the mud. A single hole through his helmet tells the story. He never heard the shot that killed him. Morrison is the 4th man this platoon has lost in 72 hours. 4 men, 4 shots, 4 kills. The German sniper, or snipers, no one knows for certain, has transformed this small sector of Normandy into a killing ground. Every attempt to locate the shooter has failed. 2 scouts sent forward never returned. A machine gun team tried to provide covering fire. Their gunner took a round through the eye socket before he could squeeze off a single burst. Command is screaming for progress. The advance has stalled. An entire American infantry company, 163 men, is pinned down by an enemy they cannot see, cannot find, cannot fight. And Ray Castillo, a 23-year-old former physics student from New Mexico, is reaching into his pack for something that will either save his brothers or get him court-martialed. His fingers close around a small shaving mirror. What happens next will become one of the most unconventional tactical innovations of the Second World War, a technique so effective that it will be studied at military academies for decades. But in this moment, as Ray Castillo prepares to reveal his position to a hidden killer, only one question matters. Will the stupid trick that his officers banned actually work? To understand what Raymond Castillo was about to attempt, we need to go back before the blood and the mud and the endless crack of rifle fire. Back to the sun-baked deserts of New Mexico, where a skinny kid with thick glasses discovered that light could be a weapon. Ray Castillo was born in 1921 in the small town of Las Cruces, the second of 5 children born to Maria and Eduardo Castillo. His father worked the railroads. His mother cleaned houses for wealthy families across town. They were poor in the way that many families were poor during the Depression, never quite hungry, but never quite full either. From an early age, Ray was different. While his brothers played baseball in dusty lots, Ray sat on the porch with a magnifying glass, burning patterns into wooden boards. While other children collected baseball cards, Ray collected lenses, cracked spectacles from the trash, broken camera optics from the repair shop, anything that bent light in interesting ways. That boy sees the world different, his mother would say. He sees what the light does. At 17, Ray won a partial scholarship to the University of New Mexico to study physics. He was particularly fascinated by optics, the science of light, reflection, and refraction. For 2 years, he studied how light bounced off surfaces at predictable angles, how mirrors could reveal what direct observation could not. Then, Pearl Harbor happened. Ray enlisted in February 1942. He was assigned to the 29th Infantry Division, a unit that would eventually storm the beaches of Normandy on D-Day. During training, he discovered something that troubled him deeply. The Army had a sniper problem. American casualties from enemy sniper fire were disproportionately high. German marksmen, trained extensively in concealment and patience, were killing sergeants, officers, and radio men with terrifying efficiency. The standard counter-sniper doctrine was simple: spot the muzzle flash, direct overwhelming fire at the position, and hope for the best. But what if you could not see the flash? What if the sniper fired from deep shadow, from behind barriers, from positions where no flash was visible? Ray had an idea, a physics idea. He began experimenting with small mirrors during training exercises. The concept was elegant. Instead of exposing your head to search for a sniper, you extended a mirror on a stick or wire. The mirror could be angled to scan buildings, windows, and tree lines from complete safety. More importantly, Ray discovered that a sniper's scope would reflect sunlight, even faint ambient light, creating a brief glint visible only at specific angles. Using geometry he had learned at university, Ray calculated that a trained observer could pinpoint a hidden rifleman's position by triangulating multiple mirror observations. He was excited. He wrote a detailed proposal and submitted it to his commanding officer, Captain Harold Brennan. Captain Brennan called Ray's idea the stupidest thing I've ever heard from an enlisted man. "You want to fight Germans with shaving mirrors?" Brennan reportedly laughed. "Castillo, this is a war, not a science fair. Get back to your unit and focus on learning how to actually shoot a rifle." The proposal was rejected, officially discouraged. Ray was warned that any further unauthorized tactical experimentation would result in disciplinary action. So Ray Castillo buried his mirrors at the bottom of his pack and tried to forget, until Normandy proved Captain Brennan catastrophically wrong. To understand the crisis that Raymond Castillo faced in June 1944, we must first understand the nature of the enemy he confronted. German sniper doctrine in World War II was arguably the most sophisticated in the world. The Wehrmacht began systematically training designated marksmen in 1942, and by 1944, their techniques had been refined through years of brutal combat on the Eastern Front. The standard German sniper rifle was the Karabiner 98K, equipped with a Zeiss Zielvier 4X optical scope. In skilled hands, this weapon was deadly accurate out to 800 meters. But the rifle was only part of the equation. What made German snipers truly lethal was their training in concealment, patience, and psychological warfare. A Wehrmacht sniper manual captured in 1944 reveals their philosophy clearly. The sniper's primary weapon is not his rifle. It is invisibility. A sniper who is seen is already dead. Therefore, the successful sniper kills without ever being located. German snipers were trained to select positions with multiple escape routes. They camouflaged not just their bodies but their equipment. Rifle barrels were wrapped in burlap. Scopes were fitted with honeycomb filters to prevent reflection. They were taught to fire no more than 3 shots from any single position before relocating. Most importantly, they were trained in patience. A German sniper might observe a sector for an entire day before taking a single shot, waiting for the perfect target, an officer giving orders, a radioman calling for support, a medic whose death would doom wounded men. By June 1944, American forces had developed a healthy terror of German snipers. The psychological impact was devastating. In his memoir, 129th Division veteran wrote, "The worst part wasn't the dying, the worst part was not knowing where it was coming from. You couldn't fight back, you could only hide and pray." The sector where Ray Castillo's platoon found itself pinned down was a nightmarish piece of Norman terrain. The village of Grain, or what remained of it, sat at a crossroads vital to the American advance. Stone buildings with thick walls provided perfect cover for defenders. Hedgerows, the infamous bocage of Normandy, created natural shooting lanes that favored the entrenched Germans. Intelligence estimated that the village was held by elements of the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Division, specifically a reconnaissance unit reinforced with at least 2 trained sniper teams. Captured German documents would later reveal that these snipers had orders to delay the American advance by any means necessary. They were succeeding. In the 72 hours before Ray Castillo reached for his mirror, the following had occurred. 4 American soldiers killed by precision rifle fire. 9 wounded, 3 critically. 3 separate patrols ambushed while attempting to locate sniper positions. 0 confirmed enemy casualties. The mathematics were unsustainable. At this rate of attrition, the platoon would be combat ineffective within a week. Every traditional counter-sniper technique had failed. Mortar barrages hit nothing. Machine gun suppression fire was answered by silence, followed hours later by another American body. A spotter team using standard binoculars had the glass of their optics shattered by a round that passed within inches of the observer's face. Command was considering calling in artillery to level the entire village. This would eliminate the sniper threat, but it would also destroy the crossroads that American forces needed intact. Moreover, there were reports of French civilians still hiding in cellars throughout the area. A barrage would kill them too. Lieutenant James Wexler, who had assumed command after the previous lieutenant took a round through the throat, was out of options, and Ray Castillo was out of patience. Now let us talk about the physics of what Ray proposed. The principle behind mirror reconnaissance is deceptively simple, but requires precise understanding to execute. When light strikes a reflective surface, such as the glass of a rifle scope, it bounces off at an angle equal to the angle at which it arrived. This is called the law of reflection, and it holds true regardless of conditions. In practical terms, this means that if you know the angle of ambient light, from the sun, from reflected skylight, from any source, and you know the angle at which you observe a reflection, you can calculate the precise position of the reflective surface. A sniper scope, no matter how carefully shielded, contains multiple glass elements. Under certain light conditions, these elements create a brief, telltale glint. The sniper may be invisible to the naked eye, completely concealed in shadow, but his scope betrays him. Ray Castillo had refined this theory during months of training exercises. He had documented that with 2 observation points separated by at least 20 meters, he could triangulate a sniper's position to within a 2-yard accuracy. With 3 observation points, accuracy improved to less than 1 yard, close enough for a mortar round to be effective. His kit was simple. 3 small mirrors, approximately 2.3 inches each, 3 lengths of wire, 18 inches each, a grease pencil for marking angles, and a small notebook with pre-calculated trigonometric tables. Total cost, approximately $2. Total weight, less than half a pound. And on the morning of June 14, 1944, Ray Castillo decided that his court-martial was less important than his brothers' lives. The first thing Ray Castillo did was break regulations. Before dawn on June 14th, he approached Lieutenant Wexler in the makeshift command post, a root cellar beneath what had once been a farmhouse. Wexler was hunched over a map marking positions by candlelight. He had not slept in 2 days. Neither had anyone else. "Sir," Ray said, "I have an idea." Wexler did not look up. "Unless your idea involves an airstrike or divine intervention, save it." "It involves mirrors, sir." That got Wexler's attention. He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and suspicious. "Mirrors." "Yes, sir, I can find the snipers. I can find all of them, without losing another man." What followed was a 15-minute conversation that would later be reconstructed from Wexler's personal journal and Ray's own post-war interviews. The lieutenant was skeptical, more than skeptical. He had heard about Castillo's rejected proposal. He knew that Captain Brennan, now dead from a mortar round on D-Day, had called the idea ridiculous, but Wexler was also desperate. "Explain it to me like I'm an idiot," he said, "because right now I've got 4 dead boys and 0 other options." Ray laid out his theory, the angles, the reflections, the triangulation. He showed Wexler his homemade kit, the mirrors, the wire, the notebook. He explained that he would need 2 volunteers to serve as secondary observation points, and he would need the platoon to create a brief distraction to draw the sniper's attention. "And if you're wrong?" Wexler asked. "Then I'll probably be dead, sir, but if I'm right, we'll have every sniper position marked within 2 hours. Wexler stared at him for a long moment. Then he said 4 words that would change everything. "Do it, but quietly." Ray selected 2 men for his observation team, Private First Class Antonio Reyes, a carpenter from Texas with steady hands, and Private George Whitman, a former surveyor from Ohio, who understood angles and measurement. Both men thought Ray was crazy. Both men volunteered anyway. At 05:47 hours, as the first gray light began to seep over the horizon, the three men moved into position. Ray's plan required them to establish 3 observation points in a rough triangle around the suspected sniper zone. He took the northernmost position, crouched behind a destroyed farm cart approximately 140 meters from the nearest intact building. Reyes moved to the western point, using a drainage ditch for cover. Whitman crawled to the eastern position, sheltering behind a low stone wall. Each man carried a mirror attached to a thin wire. The wire allowed them to extend the mirror above their cover without exposing their heads. By angling the mirror carefully, they could observe reflected images of the buildings ahead. The first 20 minutes produced nothing. Gray light revealed gray stone. No movement, no reflection, no sign of the enemy. Then the distraction began. At 06:12 hours, precisely as planned, a fire team on the southern edge of the American position opened up with a bar, a Browning automatic rifle, firing a sustained burst at a pre-selected section of wall. The noise was tremendous. The muzzle flash was visible for hundreds of yards, and in the village something glinted. Ray saw it in his mirror, a brief flash of reflected light from a second-floor window approximately 220 meters to his northeast. The glint lasted less than a second, but it was enough. He noted the angle, marked his position, and waited. 30 seconds later, Reyes signaled. He had seen something too, same window, different angle. Whitman confirmed moments after, 3 angles, 3 observations, 1 position. Ray pulled out his notebook and did the calculations. His hands were trembling slightly, but his mathematics was sound. Within 4 minutes, he had a coordinate. The sniper was positioned in the northeast corner of the second-floor room, approximately 3 feet back from the window, 1 down. But how many more? Over the next 97 minutes, Ray Castillo and his 2-man team identified 4 more sniper positions. The second was in a church bell tower, approximately 310 meters from American lines. The sniper there had constructed an elaborate hide using blankets and debris, but his scope betrayed him when he shifted to track the bar team's movement. The third was the most dangerous, a ground-level position in a collapsed barn only 80 meters from the American perimeter. This sniper had concealed himself so well that previous patrols had walked within 20 feet of him without detecting his presence. But at 06:34 hours, when a squad of Americans moved along a hedgerow to his south, he rotated his rifle to track them, and his scope caught the rising sun. The 4th position was in a farmhouse basement, shooting through a narrow ventilation slit. The 5th was in a haystack that had been hollowed out and reinforced with wooden supports. Each time, the process was the same: create a brief stimulus, movement, sound, or muzzle flash, observe any reflective response through the mirrors, triangulate with multiple angles, and calculate the position. By 07:49 hours, Ray had a map with 5 confirmed sniper positions. Lieutenant Wexler studied it in the root cellar, his expression shifting from skepticism to something approaching awe. "You're certain about these?" 90% confident, sir. Maybe higher on positions 1 through 3. The last 2 were harder to triangulate. We only got 2 clean angles each. Wexler looked at the map, then at Ray. "If you're right, we can end this in 20 minutes with directed mortar fire." "If I'm right, sir?" The first mortar barrage began at 08:03 hours. 3 rounds targeted the second-floor window where Ray had identified the first sniper. The building's facade erupted in smoke and pulverized stone. When the dust cleared, a section of the upper floor had simply ceased to exist. Secondary explosions, probably ammunition cooking off, confirmed that something had been there. The church bell tower received 6 rounds. The ancient stone structure groaned, swayed, and partially collapsed. No secondary explosions, but no return fire either. The collapsed barn proved more difficult. Its low profile meant that mortar rounds tended to overshoot. After 4 misses, Wexler authorized a direct assault by a reinforced squad. They found the hide empty. The sniper had apparently fled when the barrage began. But the position was exactly where Ray's calculations had predicted, down to the improvised shooting rest constructed from ammunition crates. The farmhouse basement and the haystack position were neutralized with fragmentation grenades. One produced a scream, abruptly cut short. The other produced silence. 5 positions identified, 5 positions eliminated, 0 American casualties. But Ray Castillo wasn't finished. What Ray could not have known, what no one on the American side would learn until after the war, was that the 5 positions he had identified represented only part of the German sniper network in the grain sector. Wehrmacht records captured in 1945 revealed that the 17th SS had deployed 9 snipers to defend the village, operating in 3-man teams with overlapping fields of fire. Ray's morning operation had eliminated or displaced 5 of them, but 4 remained, and they knew something had changed. Obergefreiter, Corporal Klaus Wendt, was a veteran of the Eastern Front, where he had earned his marksmanship badge killing Soviet officers in the ruins of Stalingrad. He was 41 years old in June 1944, elderly by infantry standards, but his eyesight remained perfect, and his patience was legendary. Wendt had watched the morning's events from a concealed position in a drainage culvert approximately 400 meters from the American lines. He had seen the mortars destroy his comrades' positions with surgical precision. He had noted the timing, the accuracy, the impossibility of such targeting through conventional observation. The Americans had found a new trick. Wendt reported his observations to his immediate superior, Feldwebel, Sergeant Ernst Gruber, who commanded the remaining sniper elements. What Gruber decided next would determine whether Ray Castillo's innovation would save lives or simply delay the inevitable. Gruber was not a stupid man. He recognized that the American mortar fire had been too accurate to be coincidental. The enemy had somehow located concealed positions that had remained hidden for 3 days. This suggested one of 3 possibilities: an informer, aerial reconnaissance, or a new detection method. Gruber ruled out an informer. The positions had been established without civilian knowledge. Aerial reconnaissance was possible, but unlikely. The overcast skies had grounded most observation aircraft. That left the third option. The Americans had developed some means of detecting snipers that the Germans did not understand. His response was tactically sound. He ordered his remaining 4 men to cease all operations during daylight hours. They would relocate to secondary positions after dark. They would avoid any movement that might betray their presence. And most importantly, they would cover their optics completely. No scopes, no binoculars, nothing that might reflect light. For 12 hours, from Oro 900 on June 14th to 2100 that evening, the German snipers became ghosts. Not a single shot was fired, not a single American soldier was hit. Lieutenant Wexler believed the threat had been eliminated. Ray Castillo believed otherwise. "They're still out there, sir," he told Wexler that afternoon. "The smart ones. They're adapting." "How can you know that?" "Because I would. If someone found my position using a method I didn't understand, I'd change everything. My position, my schedule, my equipment. They're not gone. They're thinking." Wexler considered this. "What do you recommend?" "We need to expand the search area, and we need to catch them during transition, when they're moving to new positions. That's when they're vulnerable." "At night?" "At night." What Ray proposed was extraordinarily dangerous. Night observation using mirrors was theoretically possible. Moonlight and starlight could produce reflections from glass or metal, but the margin for error was enormous. One misidentified position could bring friendly fire down on American troops. Moreover, moving through the contested zone after dark meant navigating territory that might contain enemy patrols, booby traps, or the very snipers they were hunting. Wexler should have said no. Standard doctrine demanded that he say no. Instead, He asked a single question. "How many men do you need?" "Just me, sir. One man makes less noise, and if something goes wrong—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not need to. At 2134 hours on June 14, 1944, Private First Class Raymond Castillo moved beyond the American perimeter and into the darkness. The night was clear, unusual for Normandy in June, with a three-quarter moon providing approximately 0.1 lux of illumination, enough to see shapes, enough to be seen if you were careless. Ray moved slowly. Each step was deliberate, weight transferred gradually from heel to toe to minimize noise. He had blackened his face with charcoal. He had wrapped his equipment in cloth to prevent any metallic sound. He carried his rifle, his mirror kit, a compass, and a single fragmentation grenade, the last resort if he was compromised. His destination was a ridgeline approximately 300 meters north of the American position, overlooking the likely approach routes that German snipers would use to reach new hides. His theory was simple. If the enemy was relocating, they would have to cross certain terrain features. If he could observe those features at the right moment, he might catch them in motion. It took 47 minutes to reach the ridgeline. Every shadow could have hidden an enemy. Every sound, a rustling branch, a distant owl, the settling of debris, made his heart pound. But he encountered no Germans, no patrols, no tripwires. At 22:21 hours, Ray Castillo was in position. He extended his mirror and began to scan. What happened over the next 3 hours would later be described by historian Stephen Ambrose as one of the most remarkable individual reconnaissance efforts of the Normandy campaign. But in the moment, it was simply a man alone in the dark, watching, waiting, and calculating. At 22:47 hours, Ray detected his first target. The reflection was faint, moonlight glinting off what appeared to be a rifle barrel approximately 400 meters to his west. The shape was moving slowly along a hedgerow. Through his mirror, Ray could make out a single figure low to the ground carrying a long weapon. He noted the position, the direction of travel, and the time. He did not fire. He did not call for support. He simply watched and recorded. The figure disappeared into a cluster of buildings on the village outskirts. New position identified. At 23:19 hours, Ray detected a second target, this one closer, perhaps 250 meters to his northwest. Two figures this time, moving in tandem. They paused at a destroyed stone wall, consulted briefly, and then split up. One continued north. The other dropped into what appeared to be a prepared position behind the wall. Two more snipers, two more positions. By 1:17 hours on June 15th, Ray had documented 9 separate German positions, 4 snipers in their new hides, plus 5 suspected alternate positions where he had observed brief activity. His notebook was filled with angles, distances, and coordinates. He had been in position for nearly 4 hours. His muscles were cramped. His eyes burned from the strain of constant observation. The temperature had dropped to near freezing, and his fingers were so cold he could barely grip his pencil. But he had what he needed. The challenge now was getting the information back. Ray began his withdrawal at 1:30 hours. He moved even more slowly than before. Fatigue made him clumsy, and the Germans were now awake and alert in their new positions. One mistake would end everything. At 1:47 hours, approximately 100 meters from the American perimeter, Ray made that mistake. His boot caught on a wire. Time seemed to freeze. Ray felt the wire go taut against his ankle. He heard the rustle of disturbed debris, and then, from somewhere behind him, close, terrifyingly close, a voice spoke in German. "Wer ist da?" Who is there? Ray did not think. He did not plan. He simply dropped flat into the mud and held his breath. Seconds passed. They felt like hours. Ray could hear footsteps now, someone approaching his position, moving cautiously through the darkness. A beam of light swept the ground to his left, a hooded flashlight searching. The footsteps grew closer, 20 feet, 15, 10. Ray's hand closed around the grenade at his belt. If he was discovered, he would take at least one of them with him. But throwing the grenade would reveal his position to every German within earshot. It would also mean he would never deliver his intelligence. 5 feet. The footsteps stopped. Ray could hear breathing now, someone standing directly over him, close enough to touch. The flashlight beam moved again, sweeping across the ground. It passed within inches of Ray's outstretched hand, and then, impossibly, the footsteps began to recede. The German soldier, probably a sentry or a sniper, moving to a new position, had somehow failed to see the American infantryman lying motionless in the mud 3 feet from his boots. Whether it was the darkness, the camouflage, or simply luck, Ray would never know. He waited 20 minutes before moving again. When he finally reached the American perimeter at 0234 hours, he was shaking so badly that he could barely give the password. But he still had his notebook. The briefing in Lieutenant Wexler's command post began at 3300 hours on June 15, 1944. Ray's notebook contained the most comprehensive sniper intelligence that the 29th Division had ever received. 4 confirmed active positions, 5 probable alternate hides, movement patterns, timing observations, approach routes. The data was precise enough to plan targeted strikes without risking American lives in direct confrontation. Wexler stared at the information for a long moment. His exhaustion seemed to lift as he processed what he was seeing. Then he looked at Ray, muddy, shaking, barely able to stand after 7 hours in the field. "Castillo, how are you still alive?" "Luck, sir. Mostly luck." "That wasn't luck." Wexler shook his head slowly. "I don't know what that was, but it wasn't luck." He turned to his radio operator. "Get me battalion. Tell them we need a priority fire mission. Tell them the sniper problem ends today." The strikes began at first light. Position 1, the building cluster where Ray had observed a German sniper disappearing, received concentrated mortar fire at 0537 hours. 27 rounds transformed the structures into smoking rubble. Recovery teams would later find a body in the debris. Obergefreiter Klaus Wendt, the Stalingrad veteran, killed by shrapnel wounds to the chest and abdomen. Positions 2 and 3 were targeted simultaneously at 0544 hours. The stone wall received white phosphorus rounds, incendiary munitions burning at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing recognizable remained. The farmhouse cellar was assaulted by infantry after artillery suppression. The German sniper inside, wounded by the initial bombardment, surrendered after exchanging only 3 shots. By 0730 hours, all 9 positions had been neutralized. Total German casualties: 4 killed, 1 captured, 4 positions abandoned. Total American casualties: 0. The Grain sniper threat, which had paralyzed an entire infantry company for 72 hours and killed 4 American soldiers, was eliminated in under 3 hours. Word spread quickly through the 29th Division. Within days, soldiers were copying Ray's methods. They improvised their own mirror kits from shaving mirrors, signal mirrors, even polished mess kit lids. They shared handwritten notes explaining the triangulation technique. They demonstrated the process during rest periods, teaching their buddies what the quiet private from New Mexico had figured out. In late July 1944, Ray received orders that terrified him more than any German sniper. He was to report to division headquarters and brief senior officers on his technique. The presentation room contained 12 colonels and majors, men with decades of military experience, men who had commanded thousands of soldiers across multiple campaigns. Ray was a private first class with a physics education and some homemade mirrors. His hands were sweating so badly he nearly dropped his notebook. He spoke for 45 minutes. He explained optical reflection principles, demonstrated triangulation mathematics, and presented statistics from grains. 14 positions identified, 2 days of observation, 0 American casualties. When he finished, Colonel Charles Canham, the division's assistant commander, famous for his volcanic temper, broke the silence. "Private Castillo, why wasn't this taught in basic training?" "I submitted a proposal before D-Day, sir. It was rejected." "By whom?" "Captain Brennan, sir. He called it stupid." Canham's expression was unreadable. "Captain Brennan is dead." "Yes, sir." "Write it up again. Everything. Theory, technique, equipment, my desk, 48 hours." Ray's revised proposal was approved within a week. By August 1944, modified versions of his optical detection technique were being taught across the European theater. The method was officially designated Optical Position Detection Infantry, though soldiers simply called it the mirror trick or Castillo's trick. The statistics told the story. Units employing optical detection methods experienced a 34% reduction in sniper-related casualties compared to units using standard doctrine. In urban combat, where snipers were most deadly, the reduction exceeded 40%. For his actions, Raymond Castillo received the Bronze Star with V device for valor. The citation credited him with extraordinary initiative and complete disregard for personal safety that directly resulted in the neutralization of 14 enemy positions without friendly casualties. He was also promoted directly to sergeant, skipping corporal entirely. Lieutenant Wexler pinned on the stripes personally. "Captain Brennan said your idea was stupid," Wexler observed. "Yes, sir, he did." Wexler almost smiled. Captain Brennan was wrong. Raymond Castillo served until Germany's surrender in May 1945. He participated in the Siegfried Line crossing, the Battle of the Bulge, and the final advance into the Reich. He was wounded twice. Both times he returned to duty. By VE Day, Sergeant Castillo had trained over 200 soldiers in optical detection. He had contributed to neutralizing an estimated 37 enemy sniper positions across 4 countries. He had earned 2 Bronze Stars and a Purple Heart with Oak Leaf Cluster. Most importantly, he had never lost a single man under his observation command, not one. After the war, Ray accepted an Army position as a counter-sniper instructor. Over the next 22 years, he trained thousands of soldiers, wrote 3 field manuals, and advised on equipment that became standard issue. The AN/PVS night vision devices, Ray sat on the design advisory board. The Army Sniper School's counter-sniper curriculum, Ray helped write it. The optical principles guiding modern battlefield surveillance. Ray published foundational papers throughout the 1950s. He retired in 1968 as a sergeant major, the highest enlisted rank. He spent his remaining years teaching high school physics in Albuquerque. His students never knew that the quiet man at the chalkboard had once crawled through enemy territory with nothing but mirrors and mathematics. Raymond Castillo died on March 7, 2003. He was 81. His obituary was 4 paragraphs. It mentioned teaching, military service, survivors. It did not mention grain. It did not mention the 14 snipers. It did not mention the lives saved. But at Fort Benning Sniper School, a display case holds a tarnished shaving mirror on green-aged wire. The plaque reads, "Original optical detection device used by SFC Raymond Castillo, 29th Infantry Division, Normandy, 1944. Instructors still bring students to see it. We began this story in the mud of Normandy, watching a shaking young man reach for a shaving mirror while death waited in the ruins ahead. Raymond Castillo did not know if his idea would work. He did not know if he would survive the next hour. He knew only that his brothers were dying, that conventional methods had failed, and that he possessed knowledge that might, just might, change the equation. He was right. 14 snipers located, 0 Americans lost in the detection process, a technique that spread across an army and saved hundreds of lives in the months that followed, all from a $2 mirror and a physics education. The military teaches many lessons about warfare, firepower, maneuver, logistics, leadership, but Raymond Castillo's story teaches something different. It teaches that innovation can come from anywhere, from a private first class, from a rejected proposal, from an idea that experts called stupid. It teaches that courage is not always about charging machine guns. Sometimes courage is reaching for an untested idea when tested methods have failed. And it teaches that history remembers the generals and forgets the privates. But the privates are often the ones who change everything. Raymond Castillo never sought recognition. He never wrote memoirs or gave speeches. He simply did what needed doing, taught what he knew, and trusted that the work mattered more than the credit. Somewhere in France, in a village called Granges, the Stones still remember. They remember the American soldiers who came to liberate them. They remember the snipers who turned their streets into killing grounds. And if stones could speak, they might remember a young man with a mirror, watching, calculating, refusing to accept that invisible enemies could not be found. The mirror trick worked. The officer who banned it was wrong, and Raymond Castillo proved that sometimes the stupidest ideas are the ones that save lives.